Hello everyone, Zelrant here, and today I thought I'd talk a little bit about Mechty since she will be coming out in a week and a half. And I think she is going to be someone that a lot of people are going to be thinking about because I think just about everybody I know has pulled for Klukai, whether it's V0, V3, V6, or whatever. I think everybody is looking at Mechty coming next because she is the main support for the Corrosion team. Now, Mechty is my favorite type of unit within support games, and it's not just because she's going to be really good with Klukai, but the actual potential she has in the future of making units synergetic together that normally would not be in these types of games. And when I'm talking about that, it's going to be regarding one of the big things in her passives with regarding this buff right here on her. And this is something that I'm hoping we can see more of with other units regarding other elements, because I like to see a lot of ability to create some unique teams amongst units that normally wouldn't be unique together. Now, what makes Nightmare so good is it kind of goes into the second part here, but we'll read the whole thing as a total here. So it increases AoE damage by 10%, which is great. Then increases AoE support damage by 50%, which that's going to be huge. So if you already know, with Klukai and Peridia, Klukai is getting Peridia to do all of her support actions, which are considered AoE. That's a just straight 50% damage increase right there. But the biggest part of it is this part right here. Changes the damage type of AoE support damage to corrosion damage. And why I really like this inner kit, and I'm hoping we can see this with future things, like I've already discussed possibly with some other units, why they have specific damage types, is that it can open up the potential of future units. Right now, this really only applies to Peridia because you have that combo of Klukai causing Peridia to do a ton of support actions, and now this is going to convert those from being physical to corrosion, which is also going to be really good because now Peridia is going to be able to do the elemental damage, and Mechty has the ability to put corrosion weakness on the enemies, so that's going to make it really good there. But it also opens up possibility for future units of all elements. One small example, and I don't think anyone's going to really use her for this, but this would also impact someone like Lotta as well. Lotta's an AoE unit, and she has down here within her passive right here where she can perform one instance of Y support, which is a support action, dealing AoE physical damage equivalent to 50%. Now, she is an ice unit, but with that, it's going to convert it to corrosion, so this gives her the ability to do corrosion damage. Now, it's not going to be anything significant. To me, Lotta's not going to be a member that you're going to bring into this. That's just an example of how she's impacting another unit, potentially, if you're wanting to use them. Now, this opens up for all future units. If there's ever a unit that does support actions as their core, and they are AoE, then this opens up being able to turn them into a corrosion units. And it makes me kind of think of a unit that maybe comes into Burn, because Burn has, like, Burn's whole thing is around support actions. Now, they're all single target focused support actions, but there always could be a big Burn unit that comes out in the future that is a big support action unit that does a lot of support actions, but instead they're more AoE focused. Well, now you can convert them to corrosion and make someone like that work alongside Klukai with this. And this is just kind of a hint of the possibility of doing stuff like in the future, because this also shows they're willing to put this kind of stuff in here. And that also opens up the ability for other units with different types of things. Maybe you focus on single target support attacks. So now maybe you can convert, say, like we've had with the mistranslation, convert an ice type support action, say from Macchiato, and convert that to Burn with a Burn unit. And now Macchiato can be a member of the Burn team, for example. We did see something like that with a mistranslation, but that could be something we see potentially in the future. And this is just an example of how they could do it. And so this is why I think it's really cool on her, and I think it gives her a lot of future value for any future characters that have support action AoE type attacks, because they can just get slotted right into Klukai's team regardless of their element if it's a core part of their kit. So with that, let's now just go actually look at her entire kit and then discuss how it's going to work with the corrosion team. So right off the bat, when you look at the passive down here, which is like the first thing I always like to look at, this is the one where she's at the start of battle, Mechty enters recovery mode and applies Nightmare for all allies. Now, Nightmare's that stat we just looked at. So basically, she exists, they have Nightmare, now AoE, support action, do corrosion damage. That's great there. Now, she starts off in what's called this recovery mode, And she's going to basically, if you're playing her correctly, from what it looks, she's going to only be in it for a single turn because of her ultimate here. Now, when we look at her two different modes she has recovery mode and frenzy mode. So she starts in recovery mode, which decreases damage received by 30% and stability damage received by 2 points. And this cannot be so basically makes it where she's a little bit more tanky. She has another mode called Frenzy Mode, which increases attack and defense by 30%. At the end of action, increases Confectance Index by 2 points. This is how she actually gets Confectance Index within her kit. So how does she get in Frenzy Mode? That is actually coming from her ultimate here. And so when you go to her ultimate, this has a cooldown of 4 turns. So that's kind of a little bit key in how this all going together. But on her ultimate, removes recovery mode, so she loses her recovery mode and activates frenzy mode for 3 turns. So as you can see, you're going to be in frenzy mode if you're playing her the way I think she should be played. You're going to be in frenzy mode for 3 turns, you're going to be in recovery mode for a single turn, and then you're going to go right back into frenzy mode when you cast her ultimate again. And then when frenzy mode ends, returns back to recovery mode, applies Nightmare Shield to all allies, and then applies Toxic Shroud to the nearest enemy for 1 turn. Now, Nightmare Shield is something that can make it where your teammate's a little bit more tanky, reduces the attack by 5%, and removes the debuff from the enemy. But also, if they get attacked within their weakness type, so like, for example, Mechty is a Hydro weak. If she gets attacked by Hydro or heavy ammo here, it's going to also decrease damage done by 30%. It can only be activated once, though. But we have that, and then we also, in Frenzy Mode, have some things that impacts her other skills here. Now, when we get up to her skills here, we're actually going to take a little bit more of a look at her basic attack versus what we look at other units, because her basic attack is unique in this one, that it's not just a basic attack. There actually is a little bit to it, more than just does some damage. And that is, so she has her normal basic attack, but then you have her when in frenzy mode. So when in frenzy mode, deals corrosion damage and increases damage dealt to stability by 2 points. So when she does this, now she does corrosion damage and it does a little bit more stability damage. That is good there. Now if we go into her second skill here, Dreamquake. This one is got a cooldown of 2 turns, stability damage of 3. This one selects an enemy target within 8 tiles and deals AoE corrosion damage, equivalent to 130% attack, and all nearby enemies within 1 tile radius of the target. One nice thing I like about this one is that it is AoE corrosion, and this is going to be more of her down the line when we have like if you start getting to a point where maybe you get a V6 Peridia down the line, is when you're playing because Klukai can get the first 6 support actions really easily on Peridia off. But when it comes to if you have her V6 and now she can do 10, this is just another way that you can start getting those extra support actions out with her AoE there. But it does that. But then also when in frenzy mode, and a big thing is you're going to be in frenzy mode 3 out of 4 turns. Gains movement up 2 for 1 turn and generates toxic tiles within skill range for 2 turns. This one's going to be important here. The toxic tiles, which is basically like all the other elemental tiles, that it's going to make it where they are weak to corrosion, which is right here. Applies corrosion weakness to the enemy, and then it deals fixed damage as the attackers attack, and stability lost 1 that lasts for 2 turns. So a really nice, I really like the corrosion debuff because you're getting that stability loss and doing some damage, but also getting that corrosion weakness on them, which just basically makes it where now your Klukai can work pretty much well anywhere. You have that, and then you have her next skill here, Dreamless Night, and so this one is got a Confectance cost, and this is the only one that has Confectance costs, but remember, you get your Confectance points at end of turn, so 2 points every turn, end of turn in frenzy mode, so it's basically every other turn if you want to count it that way to cast this skill. Now with Dreamless Night, recovers 6 stability, cleanses all debuffs from self, and applies Dream Guardian to all allies within 8 tile radius for 2 turns. And so what this Dream Guardian is increases damage dealt by AoE support attacks by 30%, so even more damage for Peridia there. And it's considered a buff. So that is really nice for her as well. And then you have her second part when in frenzy mode, which you're going to be a majority of the time. Dreamquake and Bedtime Warm-Up can be used after this skill. So it's basically almost like an extra action. You use this skill once you have the cost to do it, and then you can immediately do either a basic attack or Dreamquake. So that's going to be really nice there. And basically with the rotation, you're going to be rotating back and forth between these. You're actually going to want to use basic attack. She's one of the few people that actually likes using her basic attack. And then after that, End gains 1 layer of Sleep Aid Kit for 2 turns. And Sleep Aid Kit increases damage dealt by 10%. This can be stacked. So just a little bit of increased damage to her. She's not going to do crazy damage herself, but she does alright damage. And then you have that, and that is pretty much everything within her kit. It's actually fairly simple in what it does. A lot of what she is your support. The big thing is she can put that stability down where you can do more stability damage. She can put the defense down on the enemies. She converts AoE support attacks into corrosion. She can implant the weakness of corrosion. So she is more of a supporter, and then she can do a little bit of damage on her own. And now when we go and take a look at her fixed keys here, because there are some good stuff in here. Bedtime Warm-Up, which is after activation, gains 1 random buff for 1 turn. So that's alright there, nothing too crazy. Fixed key 2, if Mechty countered the enemy's weakness, apply Toxic Shroud to the target after attacking. So that one's going to be great, because if you look what Toxic Shroud is, it's up here, Toxic Shroud. Increases corrosion damage received by 25%. Massive. You're going to pretty much want that one on all the time. And then you have fixed key 3. This one's an important one, but only for specific people. In Dreamquake, before attacking, inflicts acid corrosion 2 on the targets for 2 turns. Now, I kind of misspoke before earlier because I mentioned that she can do defense down. And that is actually because of this. Acid corrosion 2 is going to put that defense, reduces defense by 30%. One thing with that, though, is if you do have a Klukai V3 or higher, Klukai is already applying that, so you do not need fixed key 3 on Mechty. But know that if you have Klukai V2 or below, that is going to be perfect, because now you're going to get your defense reduction through that. Then you got fixed key 3, or fixed key 4, Dreamless Night, generates toxic tiles in a 2-tile radius around the nearest enemy that lasts for 2 turns. Great way to get your get some damage out there, as well as applying corrosion weakness. Fixed key 5, Bedtime Warm-Up. Before activation, dispels 2 buffs from the target. We know that we have bosses that like us to dispel specific buffs, like the last platoon boss. Really good right there. And then fixed key 6, if Mechty has 2 or more buffs, decreases damage received by attacks by 20%. Nothing crazy there. There's never been anything that I would be too worried about needing to reduce damage taken, which is another reason I don't really care about recovery mode too much. Now when it comes to her affinity key, attack, defense, HP %. Now I think this one is going to be a good one for, if I'm not mistaken, who likes that stat is Sabrina. Yeah, attack, defense, HP. There's a really good one for Sabrina. I mean, it doesn't really matter too much. To me, it's nothing crazy in terms of that. But that one is a... you don't see that one too often, I think, on the characters. But then you also have Common Key. Attack plus 5% increases, and then increases damage dealt by basic attacks by 20%. This one, Mechty's going to be doing basic attacks decent amount enough times, and this one's really going to be good on her specifically. I don't really know of any other character that I care about basic attack damage, so this one is kind of tied to Mechty because you will be doing basic attacks within her rotation. And so then after that, let's go ahead and take a look now at her dupes. Now, her dupes are not important at all unless you are a whale. And that is because she really doesn't get much out of her dupes unless you go all the way to V6. And that is because when we go down this list, pretty much 1 through 5 are all DPS increases for her. And she doesn't do enough for me to care. If before you invest in her dupes, you would rather invest in, say, Klukai dupes. If you have a maxed Klukai out, don't even touch hers. Just get her at V0 if you're not going for V6 on Klukai, because Klukai's dupes are all going to be better in the long run than any of hers. And then, I would actually max out Klukai's weapon before I even start looking at hers, because that's going to produce more for your corrosion team overall. But let's go ahead and get into these. So we have V1 here. Recovery mode will not be removed when entering frenzy mode. Well, we've already seen what recovery mode is. There's nothing crazy with it. It's just a reducing air damage and stability damage. I mean, it's never been really a problem for me if you have a good sustain, or in the corrosion team, Klukais is just going to wipe everything out before you even need to worry about sustaining in a lot of cases. But eventually we will get also a corrosion sustain, or we can always use someone like Suomi or Springfield or whatnot. So this is not going to ever, to me, be that important. Then you have the second part, Nightmare Shield decreases the attacker's attack by 10% and increases the number of debuffs cleansed by 1%. That's nothing crazy. I mean, you're like it's another kind of tanking one there. And then debuffs, yeah, it's a little bit better, but nothing too crazy. And then new effect added for frenzy mode increases crit rate of basic attacks by 30%. Like I said, it's more damage for Mechty, not your other units. Not that big a deal. Okay, V2. New effect is added for recovery mode. Increases the damage dealt by basic attacks by 50%. At the start of the turn, it cleanses 2 debuffs from self. Nothing too crazy here. I mean, the debuffs are nice, but then again, it's her damage. So, not anything I'd be targeting there. V3 increases the maximum stacks of sleep aid by 1. Restores HP equivalent to 30% max HP for self. Restores HP equivalent 15% of Mechty's max HP and recovers 3 stability to the lowest ally. When in frenzy mode, increases the number of sleep aid kit stacks by 1. Sleep aid kit was just more damage for her, restoring her own HP. Nothing crazy there. Like I said, you're gonna want a dedicated sustain if you're needing sustain, and everything else is kind of the same capacity there. So nothing crazy on her V3. V4 increases stability damage dealt by 2 points. So this is for Dreamquake, that one. And then when in frenzy mode, increases damage dealt by the next basic attack by 100%, and deals fixed damage equivalent to 50% attack to all enemies in range. Just another more damage to her. And it makes her have a little bit more AoE with her basic attack, but it's nothing crazy there. V5, a new effect added for frenzy mode, increases movement need by 2 tiles. At the end of action, applies Nightmare Shield to allies without Nightmare Shield, increases Confectance Index by 3 points instead. So this one is going to make it a little bit easier, because now instead of getting 2 points instead of 3, basically what it's going to allow you by getting 3 every turn is you're going to be able to spam Dreamless Night when in frenzy mode at V5. And by being able to spam that, you're also going to be able to utilize because you can use Dreamquake and Bedtime warm up after it. So it basically just adds this every time. But this one's nothing crazy to me. That's where you're going to be able to get those sleep aid kit stacks to do more damage for herself. And that's going to apply Dream Guardian to allies, and that one is for 2 turns. And if you remember, that's increasing AoE support attacks, so that's a Peridia damage increase there. But it's nothing too crazy, and it doesn't do enough to be warranted to push that far. Because if you're going to go to V5, then you might as well just go to V6, because V6 is where it matters on Mechty. You're either going to want V0 or V6. And before you even think about her V6, you're going to want to max out your Klukai completely. But on her V6, this is new effect is added for recovery mode. Increases corrosion damage dealt by allies by 25%. So now you're starting to increase damage from your allies. Now remember, recovery mode is always active now from your V1. So this new effect added for recovery mode, you might as well think of it is always being active. So you always have that 25% increase to corrosion damage, and increases crit damage dealt by basic attacks by 80%. That's more damage for herself. New effect is added for Nightmare, which is the buff that she puts on your teammates that's always available. Increases AoE support damage by 80%. Instead, increases stability damage by 1 point, and increases AoE damage dealt. So this is just going to do a lot more damage from Klukai, and then 80% for support damage. But if you look at what Nightmare already was, it was 50. So that's just an additional 30% damage there. And I believe, 10% on AoE, so it's an additional 10% on AoE damage. So you are getting a decent increase in damage. It's looking to be, so corrosion 25 and then 10. So you're getting about like a 30%, 35% damage increase to like a Klukai, and then another 30% to your Peridia. And then her own damage has gone up by 80%. So you are getting more damage to your entire corrosion team in this case, but it's not worth going all the way to V6. You're better off investing heavily into another character overall, like a Springfield, for example, because right now the hybrid Hydro and Corrosion with for example, a V6 Klukai and a V6 Springfield is insane on the damage. That getting her V6 is just not worth it. Even if unless you're a super whale V6ing everyone, I wouldn't do this one just because there's way more value in so many other units, especially for the other elements as well. She's absolutely great at V0 over your Klukai. And that's going to kind of bring up the point of whether or not you should pull. I think she's going to be a very good pull unit for everybody, but not everybody right now. If you don't have Klukai right now and you're not going to play Klukai, pull Klukai, do not pull for Mechty. You don't need her. But there may be value for her in the future with future units that do support attack AoE, just kind of like Peridia, but maybe a little bit easier to control without needing someone like Klukai. But until time comes like that, you don't need Mechty unless you're getting Klukai. So they are kind of go hand in hand in that case. But she is definitely a character that I will be pulling. And I think a lot of people, I think if you have Klukai, you should absolutely pull. Now, do you need her for Klukai? No. Especially if you've got Klukai V6 or V3. Because like we've already kind of shown, if you have Klukais V3, you already lose the big thing she brings in terms of defense reduction. So the core thing that you're really getting is the increased AoE damage and converting Peridia to corrosion damage and just kind of getting that whole corrosion thing going on. And then the last thing, though, before I forget to talk about it, it's going to be her weapon, Daydream. It's actually a really good pickup for your corrosion teams. Now, it does increase basic attack damage through ignoring defense here, but really the key to it comes down here. After using basic attack, increases corrosion damage dealt by 15%, but then increases corrosion damage dealt by allies by 10%. That's like the core reason to get her weapon. It's a 10% increased damage for all corrosion. And so you pick that up, and it's just a flat damage increase for Klukai and Peridia, as well as herself on there. So this one, is absolutely not worth it to get dupes of this weapon, but one copy is good if you're really wanting to get the best bang for your buck in terms of improving your Klukai's damage. But yeah, that's kind of my thoughts on Mechty. Great character. And yeah, I will definitely be pulling for her and her weapon when she comes out here in a week and a half. But let me know in the comments what your thoughts are on here and if you're planning on pulling for her. But that's pretty much it. If you like my content, if you could like, comment, subscribe, it really helps. And thanks for watching.